In this video, we are going to install the Hyperpro Progressive springs into this bike, the KTM 390 Adventure. So if this is something you're interested in, stick around. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to my channel. If you're wondering why I'm planning to install these springs in this bike, and the forks on this bike, it's because most bikes that roll off the factory floor basically are set up for a particular weight of rider, and on average that is between 170 and 180 pounds. I am none of those. I am heavier than that. So typically bikes that come off the factory are not going to work for me. They're going to be undersprung. If you weigh less than that, they're going to be oversprung. One way to fix that, especially if you are over that, is replace the springs with something a little bit heavier. And Hyperpro has made a progressive spring. You can see the coil, the progressiveness in it, which has an increasing spring rate as it compresses. And that pretty much takes care of a wider range of riders than having to actually get the correct spring rate, the exact spring rate, for a linear feel to the fork. So for this, as it compresses, it'll get stiffer. A linear feeling spring will stay the same spring rate all the way through the travel. So this provides a much greater range of riders with progressive spring rate. Now, what this does for me is it allows me to back off the compression dampening to get it somewhere in the midpoint, because I had cranked it down quite a ways for off-road riding to try to help soak up some of those hits. And the nice thing about a progressive spring, because the spring rate is lower at the top part of the travel, you get a little bit more low speed compliance, small bump compliance over those little bumps. It's going to soak that up. But then when you do hit something hard as it compresses, it'll be able to take that as well. So we're going to do this install. First thing I've got to do is get the wheel pulled out and then get the fenders pulled out, and then we'll go through. So I will more focus on just the spring install on the forks and what we've got to do there than I am going to be on taking everything off. But if I see anything that I think needs to be covered, I'll make sure I put that in this video as well. So let's get started. Alright, just a quick note, there's a couple zip ties on the ABS sensor. There's one, it's around the post that the brake mounts on, so remember that's there. There's also a zip tie around where the fender comes and the sensor wraps around here, so just remember those are there, and also clip those off before you take it off. And then there's just one, probably like an 8mm bolt here that I've got to take off, and then that should be able to take off the brake assembly, and then I just need to suspend it here so it's not hanging from the brake cable, and then this will probably be ready to go. Now I'm going to leave this here. I've got it all loosened up, and we'll get started on the right fork since it doesn't have anything else connecting it together. If you're a very purist mechanic, you might want to look away for this next bit. I don't have the right size of socket or wrench for the top of these forks. I tried getting one. I bought a 48mm, 50mm fork cap wrench, and it didn't fit on here. So I'm not exactly sure what size this WP, the top of the WP is. Maybe it's 46, but the shops didn't have them. So what I've done is taken some adjustable pliers and I put some Gorilla Tape on them to protect the top of the cap from the teeth on this. And these aren't on very tight, and there's a way of doing this to get them off. So if this is something that's going to make you cringe, maybe just jump ahead and we'll go from there. In order to get this top cap loosened, it's already in a really good clamping system in the triple clamp. So what I'm going to do is loosen the top pinch here, and we'll get that loose. And it's just not going to take a lot, but I'm going to grab a hold of this. And there, that's loose. So now when I take the fork out, I can get the top off, get the cap off. So I'm gonna go a little bit further while it's clamped in here. All right, that's finger loose. So we'll get the fork pulled out the rest of the way. I'm just going to try to spread this a little, take some pressure off the fork. There we go. And we're out. I have a really convenient way of working on forks. I have a bike stand that the clamp that's supposed to be for a top tube opens up enough for this fork to fit in there and clamp it in. So I've got a nice solid place to do all the work, and then I can slide this down to compress everything, to get everything in here, and then I can also check the oil levels to make sure those are appropriate after I pull the old spring out and get the new one in. So this is just something I've done that's been very convenient for me. I've done numerous springs on forks using this setup. I'm not planning to change the oil in this. I only have about 8,300 miles on the forks. I'm gonna give it a little bit, and then if I need to change it, I'll do it later. Alright, it's loose. Now what I need to do is compress the fork to get to all of that stuff. Okay, I had to take a brief intermission, a couple of days actually, to get the right tools. So the locking nut that's right here, underneath here, is super thin, so a regular wrench doesn't fit in there. You need something filed down. I think it's a 21 millimeter, I'm not exactly sure, because I went and got a crescent wrench brand, very narrow, I think it's for plumbing, crescent wrench that I use to get in there to break this loose. So now, this is the challenging part, is getting this in here, and then once I did that and got that tightened down, I was able to use my pliers and break that loose. So that locking nut keeps the cap from coming off of the plunger, off your rod, and just keeps it all in place. So now that that's off, I can spin this. Now, a couple of notes, I've been looking at this piece here. So you have this bigger spacer, and then you have, I'm guessing probably about a 10 millimeter spacer, and then some various sizes getting down to very thin. The notes that they had on the Hyperpro was that the 10 millimeter spacer could be kept or taken out. I'm going to try to keep all of them in there to keep some preload on the spring that I'm putting in, because I weigh a bit more, definitely a bit more after the last year and a half. So that's what I'm planning to do. Okay, that's out. The rod is going to slide down into the fork because there's nothing holding it up. That's okay. You can let that go. Now I can go ahead and pull this spring out. I'm going to put a rag around it because as I lift it out, there's going to be fork oil on this, and then once I get that out, it's going to be time to measure the level of the oil. And I've got a bit of a hack that I'm going to use for that, and I will show you what I'm going to do. Okay, as I suspected, the new spring and the old spring, and I'll get a better shot of this. The new spring is, man, it's, I'm guessing at least 20 millimeters longer than the old spring, so you're going to have a little bit more preload. So I think that's why they're saying that 10 millimeter spacer could come out. I think what I might do is leave that one in and take the thinner ones out and try that. Okay, if you don't have the right tools for setting the oil level, there's a couple of hacks you can do. So what I've done is I've taken a straw and I've measured the overall length that this needs to be. So the height from the top of the oil to the top of the fork needs to be 140 millimeters. If you're not familiar with metric to standard measurements, it's 25.4 millimeters per inch. So 144 millimeters is effectively 5.5 inches. So what I've done is I've measured where the top needs to be and what the oil level needs to be, and then I can just slide this in until I get to the black line and just pinch it in here like you would a soda and pull it up, and I can see that my oil level is a bit high. So I think the easiest thing for me to do, since I don't have a syringe and a tube right now to pull it out, is I'm just going to do this the the long way and just pull a little bit of oil out at a time to get it at the right length. And it doesn't take much oil to affect the overall height of the oil in the fork. Alright, when installing progressive springs, the tighter coil part goes to the top. Part of that is for the oil displacement. When you put the fork spring in, it's closer to what the other spring was, and it's easier measurement than when you have all of these. So yeah, this will just displace a lot more oil than this will because it's so densely packed, so you still have more oil in the fork. Now this is a part that I find to be incredibly challenging, is keeping this rod up while you fish the spring through. So I need another hand. I'll set that there, and I'll hold this here. And we'll just okay, I just dropped that real quick. I've got my spacers I need to put on. So the small one, the 50 and the 10, put those on. Alright, I'm going to pinch that. Alright, now I'm just tightening that up, and all that's left to do is just tighten the cap up and get the lock nut set on there, button it all up, and we're good to go. That one is done. That was a lot easier getting it set up than I thought it was going to be. Alright, got that. Let's get this. And okay. Take that out. Got it. Now I'm going to lift this up. Pipe that down. And use this. Alright, once that's started, that'll go in really easy. And then I'll do a final tightening when I get it on the bike. I'm going to set this at, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if I feel like it's too fast, I'll just dial it in a little bit more. But I had it set at 5 before. I know with the springs be a little bit different, but I like something that's going to be a little bit more dynamic. It makes the bike feel a little bit lighter if it's coming back off the hits a little faster. Get that started. Okay. In the instruction book, it says about 15 clicks on the compression. think I'm going to start at 10. I want to see how lively and fast it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Alright, I checked to see what the torque was when I took this off. I had this set at 15 and it was just starting to break over, so I'm going to re-torque the fork clamps at 15, was it 15 Newton meters? Sitting where it's on its static sag, and I'll try to set it over the kickstand. You can see now I'm going to extend the fork, so that is significantly less than where it used to be. To extend the fork, and it'd be double what. By adding the springs to the fork, the static sag is more what it should be. I was sitting on it, and out of 6.7 inches, it was probably around 1.5 to 2 inches, which is where I would like it to be, not the 3 to 3.5 when I was fully loaded on this. So that should be a lot better. Final thoughts on adding the springs. I am kind of out in a little bit of a dirt area, and I did a bunch of loops. There's gopher holes on the side of a hill. There's a lip on the edge. I was up and down over that. I hit a few holes pretty hard. The forks, it's really remarkable what changing springs out can do. I could tell just coming in on the dirt road on the washboards, because I was able to set the compression dampening to about 1/3, like 10 clicks. It made it running over the tops of those much smoother, and then it was taking the hits. I think I may have bottomed once or twice out here goofing off, but it wasn't a harsh bottom. I think for now I'm going to leave the compression pretty far open compared to the way it was before. I had the compression cranked down quite a ways so that I wasn't bottoming it as much. So with that increasing fork rate, it'll take care of a lot of those bigger hits without having to compensate through the hydraulics of the fork. So I'm very happy about that. And one of the other side effects, now that the static sag isn't as low, it's a smaller amount, it's given me almost 1 inch more ground clearance just from where it's sitting. So overall the bike should be riding higher in the suspension, providing more ground clearance, which is fantastic. I think I measured this, and it's back up to about 8 inches of ground clearance underneath, which is higher than it was before I put the Black Dog Cycleworks skid plate on there. So again, today's just to trying it out, just to feel the difference. It's going to take months and months and months of riding over a variety of different terrains to really get a feel for what the springs have done. But I've put progressive springs in other bikes before, and the transformation of the bike is really remarkable. And seeing as how this bike has adjustable suspension, it makes it a lot easier to tune it up where you want it. Now, what I will say is after putting the forks in, I can already tell the harshness of the rear shock, which at some point I will replace this, likely go with the Hyperpro just to match things up. The rear shock has high and low speed compression dampening, and then rebound dampening as well, and then I could get it with a hydraulic preload, which would suit all of my needs and make this a really smooth running riding bike, especially with the off-road riding that I do. I don't ride fast off-road. I will not ride fast off-road, but it's a more controlled ride, and it just increases the capability a little bit more. The last thought I have on this is I should have changed the fork oil. I was just in a hurry to get this done. I've got other things going on, so I was getting like a half hour to work on it at a time. You could see my clothing changes throughout the video. So I didn't have all the time that I wanted. If I was to do it again, I would just change the fork oil, because at about 4,000 or 5,000 miles, I'm gonna have to change the fork oil anyway. And then it just would have saved me from having to do that. So if you do this, change the fork oil while you're doing it. I should have done that. I was just impatient, and that was dumb. I think that's about it. If you have any questions about these forks, the fork springs, leave those in the comments below. You can pick it up from Hyperpro Performance if you go on their website. I think you can order it online. I ended up having to call the US dealer and then just ordered it over the phone with him. Not a big deal. I think it took 2 weeks to get the springs in. The installation really wasn't that hard. Compressing the spring to get the lock nut on, that was a bit of a struggle. There's probably a tool for that, I don't know. But I was able to get it, and the ride and the feel is noticeable. So yeah, if you have this bike, you take it off-road, I really recommend doing this install. Even if you just take the forks in and have the dealership do it, it's worth doing. So thanks for watching. I hope you found this informative, and it inspires you to get out, do some riding, maybe make some upgrades to your bike, and I will see you out there.